2016 not only marks the release of the much anticipated Uncharted 4 Thieves End, but also the 20th anniversary of the original Crash Bandicoot game. Yeah, I find it hard to believe too. I mean, how many times has Uncharted 4 been delayed at this point? Jokes aside, Naughty Dog have consistently been one of my favourite developers for as long as I've been playing games. From mascot platformers like Crash and Jak to the third-person shooters of Uncharted and The Last of Us, the award-winning studio have evolved over the years like no other, becoming one of the most revered and highly regarded developers in the entire industry. So today, to celebrate my love for the Santa Monica dev, I'm going to count down the 10 best from the very best. Let's go! Number 10, Crash Bandicoot. It's the game that put Naughty Dog on the map 2 decades ago, and it's hard to imagine where they'd be today if it wasn't for the original marsupial. Originally conceived to rival that of Mario and Sonic, which is actually kind of crazy to say it now, Crash Bandicoot quickly became the face of PlayStation. But of course you already knew that. The question is, does the first game still hold up today? In my opinion, yes. For the most part. Visually, it's held up extremely well, especially when compared to most 3D games of the mid-90s. Thanks in part to its bright, sharp and simplistic design, breaking crates and spinning into enemies is as satisfying as it ever was. It's a little stiff. Only being able to control Crash with a D-pad in a 3D space isn't completely ideal, which is fine in the earlier levels. I mean, the bosses are complete pushovers. By the time you reach the third island, you'll find that platforming isn't quite as precise as the game requires. Also, only being able to save the game after completing a bonus stage is dumb. It's dumb and I don't like it. If there's a classic game crying out for an HD remake, it's this one. Heck, remake the entire PS1 Crash trilogy while you're at it. So. Number 9, Jak III. The third entry in the Jak and Daxter series will continue with the dark and edgy turn that took place in the previous game, Jak II Renegade. Only this time it would go all Mad Max style and throw the titular heroes into a desert wasteland, complete with awesome doom buggies to commandeer, ranging from modest machine gun toting cars to huge ass tanks that can destroy anything in a heartbeat. You can't tell me this isn't fun. Because it is. Other improvements over Jak 2 is the game's morph gun. Beforehand you only had 4 different firing modes, whereas in Jak 3 it now has a total of 12. It still has the basic shotgun and rifle abilities, but now with upgradable mods you can unleash carnage on your foes by disrupting gravity around them, or just by outright nuking them. Although I always found spamming the bouncing bullets around the stage oftentimes way more efficient anyway. This is due in part to Jak 3 and Jak 2 before it, controlling more like a traditional 3D platformer, lacking the precise aiming that a third-person shooter would normally allow. So yeah, the game's by no means perfect, but it probably has the most variety out of any Jak game, not to mention the absolutely mental plot twist that comes towards the end of the game, which will make you re-evaluate everything about the series that you've experienced up until then. Number 8, Uncharted: Drake's Fortune. Much like the first Crash Bandicoot game, the first Uncharted still holds up remarkably well from a visual standpoint, what with its lush green forests and beautiful vistas. But also like the first Crash, its controls haven't aged particularly well. The aiming in the original release doesn't feel quite as precise as its subsequent releases, not to mention the now infamous 6-axis controls for balancing on logs and arcing grade throws. They felt forced back in 2007, and they're still just as awful today. But enough of the negatives, because this game has way more positives going for it. For a start, casting Nolan North as the game's protagonist Nathan Drake was a stroke of genius. North injects so much charm and charisma into Drake that he turns what could have been a somewhat generic third-person shooter into a memorable action romp. Sure, he is incredibly similar to Nathan Fillion's Malcolm from Firefly, what with sharing the same first name as the actor, but I think it was more than a coincidence that Firefly composer Greg Edmonson was brought on to compose the music for the first 3 Uncharted games, which is arguably just as memorable as everything else that embodies the series. Drake's Fortune was a great introduction to the Uncharted series that would only get better from here on out. Number 7, Crash Bandicoot 2: Cortex Strikes Back. A year after the original Crash, and Crash 2 improves over the first in pretty much every single way. There are more frames of animation, better lighting, more moves at Crash's disposal, like sliding and slamming, and best of all, the ability to save at any time between levels. Heck, the entire level select system was completely overhauled, and it's all the better for it. The level design and environments, however, do borrow a little too heavily from the first for my liking, but again, they're greatly improved. There's the return of the somewhat iconic Indiana Jones-inspired boulder chase, as well as a new animal riding level, only this time you're on the world's cutest polar bear. Not to mention that he controls much better than the boar from the first game. And to be honest, that's a running theme in Cortex Strikes Back. The element of control is more precise. For what the game lacks in originality and innovation, it more than makes up for it with some of the best platforming to be found on the PS1. Number 6, Crash Bandicoot 3: Warped. Released literally a year to the day after Crash 2, Crash 3 follows suit in playing fairly similar to the first two games, albeit adding some much needed variety to its levels. Not only is the game's plot about time travel, allowing for some far more interesting settings than green jungle level and slightly brown jungle level, so instead you had the likes of the Middle Ages, prehistoric times, and even riding the Great Wall of China. But you now do more than simple platforming. There are some cool motorbike races, water jet ski sections where you play as Crash's sister Coco, and even some nice pace-breaking underwater sections. On top of all that, Crash can acquire new abilities from defeated bosses, Mega Man style, like the spin glide and double jump, adding extra replayability to the overall package, even if the bosses are still insultingly simple. By 1998, the Crash formula had well been worn, but Warped had introduced more than enough new ideas to keep the franchise from feeling stale. It was just a shame that it didn't last particularly long. Number 5, Uncharted III: Drake's Deception. There seems to be a running theme with Naughty Dog's third entries in their series, and that's the desert. At this point in the franchise, Uncharted had become well known for its jaw-dropping set pieces, and Drake's Deception certainly didn't disappoint. There's the aforementioned desert part, where our titular hero falls out of a burning plane. There's even more fire when Nate and Sully find themselves trapped in a blazing mansion, and who could forget the capsizing cruiser ship that sees Drake outrun gushing water. They're all really incredible moments, but the biggest issue is, they all feel rather disconnected from one another. This is largely due to the team creating the amazing spectacles first, and then building the mechanics and story around them, resulting in not only a forgettable narrative, but a rather disjointed one too. But to be honest, these are just minor nitpicks in an otherwise amazing pulp shooter. The attention to detail in this 5-year-old game is just staggering, from the way Nate reaches out his hands as he glides past the environment, or how he seamlessly picks up objects to use as weapons when brawling with enemies, or even how you can pluck the pin from someone's grenade whilst it's still attached to them. Sadistic, I know, but oh so satisfying. And Uncharted 3 is full of so many more moments like this. Drake's Deception isn't without its issues, but they only became apparent after Naughty Dog set the bar so high for themselves, and would continue to do so in the years that followed. Number 4, Crash Team Racing. How would Naughty Dog follow up the awesome Crash Bandicoot 3? With a kart racer, of course. At first glance it would seem like a Mario Kart clone, and it is, but it's quite possibly the very best of its kind. And the reason being is just how tight the controls are. Once you build up speed and rhythm, you'll be drift boosting around every corner and trick jumping over every ramp. Yeah, that's right, Crash was trick boosting nearly a decade before Mario and friends were. Although if there's one game that CTR clearly takes inspiration from, it's Diddy Kong Racing, namely in its adventure mode. It's pretty much like for like, with you collecting keys to unlock doors, gain access to more tracks to race on, eventually leading up to a boss race, and they can be just as difficult as DKRs. You still have your standard Grand Prix, multiplayer versus, and even battle modes for added variety, which like most kart races, shone the most with 3 friends. As long as you got the multi-tab, that is. I'll admit that the weapons are a little uninspired. Aku Aku is basically this game's equivalent of the Star. Then you've got generic homing missiles and bowling ball bombs. But like I said earlier, Crash Team Racing really is one of the greatest kart races of all time, and probably the best of its generation. Number 3, Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. Continuing their inspirations from Nintendo and Rare, Jak and Daxter was Naughty Dog's take on the Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie 3D adventure platformer formula, but by being on more powerful hardware than the N64 resulted in some really impressive technical feats at the time. Obviously the game looks visually so much sharper, with its cartoony style still holding up some 15 years later, but the PS2 allowed for some seamless changing between worlds, with little to no load times. It also had a full day-night cycle, only adding to the immersion that this was a real world that you were free to explore at your own will. Yeah, you still collect a bunch of shiny stuff, but the worlds are so varied and fun to roam around in, it hardly matters. You know, it's all about the journey and all that. There are some short vehicle sections to break up platforming, but the game never really relies on these tropes. It's all about you and jumping around a huge open world collecting well-hidden trinkets. If you're waiting for the likes of Yooka-Laylee and A Hat in Time to come out, and you've not tried the original Jak and Daxter, then you owe it to yourself to play one of the best and most overlooked 3D platformers of all time. Number 2, Uncharted 2: Among Thieves. Probably one of the best video game sequels of all time, Uncharted 2 improved on the original in every single way. For better or for worse, this was when the series became known for its incredible set pieces. From being chased by a chopper atop the roofs of a city, leading to an entire building crumbling around you while you're still in it, to when Nate boards a moving train and you still have to wait at the front, all the while fending off against waves of guards as you jump between moving carriages. Oh, and also there's another helicopter. It's intense stuff, but above all its pacing is unmatched for an action game. You as the player witness everything that Nathan Drake does, so it makes sense to have the game slow down after a huge heavy the action scene, such as an entire train blowing up in the middle of a snowy wasteland, rather than globetrotting for the sake of getting to the next explosive action set piece. And without getting too much into spoilers, the game has a worthy final act boss fight, something that both Uncharted 1 and 3 severely lacked. Uncharted 2 was also noteworthy introducing online multiplayer into the series, which is still really fun to this day, unless you're playing the Nathan Drake collection, because, well, it's not there. But having said that, Uncharted 2 Among Thieves will always be remembered for its incredible single player content, even 7 years later. And number 1, The Last of Us. What is there to say about this game that hasn't already been said? It blends masterful storytelling with tense and brutal gameplay. Wait, that has already been said? Well, if there's one thing that I love about The Last of Us over any other Naughty Dog game, it's how it breaks its own conventions. I mean, the fact that you start out playing the game as the main protagonist's daughter before everything goes down completely threw me off guard. Then there's other moments, like how throughout the campaign, you use a typical gameplay mechanic of boosting up Ellie to higher walls, only this time she's not there because of the trauma she went through in the previous chapter. These kind of small instances add depth to the characters seamlessly within the mechanics of the gameplay. It's not just, okay, watch a cutscene. Now play the game for a bit. Oh wait, here's more cutscenes. I know I talked about how great Uncharted 2's pacing was as an action game, but with The Last of Us, I literally couldn't stop playing because I wanted to see what was next. You know that things are going to get worse, but your morbid curiosity gets the better of you. I could talk more about the wonderful intricacies of The Last of Us's world, but this video has already gone on long enough. Although I will say that its multiplayer is so much better than it has any right to be. Bottom line, The Last of Us is the greatest achievement from developer Naughty Dog to date, and another reason why they're still one of my favourite studios of all time. Well, as always, thank you very much for watching, and make sure you let us know what your favourite Naughty Dog game is. Make sure you subscribe if you want to stay tuned for more top 10s like this, and while you wait, why not check out my last one I did, which was on the top 10 James Bond games. That one took me a while and it was long coming. But wait, what are my thoughts on Uncharted 4, I hear you cry? Well, I've started up a Let's Play with a friend, and we're just playing through the game. Or we're going to play through the game because this is actually before the game's out, so I hope that actually goes well. And then after that, we'll be making a video on our thoughts of the ending and the overall game and shit. A review discussion, if you will. So look forward to that on Project Falcon Punch coming soon.